I breathe up room, no seed biting, never bites. Fast water dribbling in the girls down with the guys. Spin now see blank, you right by. Omen G, Mac 4, Robert C, Gallon Neck Night. Hot stove talk, Robert C, bringing the hype. EC's alive, plus trust under those in my city life. White. Queens got the dreams united. On the rag, try rap in me stack. Night and under that chocolate flag. Smack that home out the park. Fuck a deafening black. Side game time, Robin CP time to ignite. Under NYC skies, we fight the good fight. Remains cheer in the orange, we unite. Match forever. I'm fit to be in sight. Match riding high. Energy like a live wire. Queen City chance. Passion never tires. Grand slam dreams and paces folding fast. Holding it steady cause we know we gonna last. We the kings of the field, time to ignite. Under NYC skies, we fight the good fight. Remain cheer in the orange, we unite. Match forever, our victory in sight. All hearts ignite like NYC stars. Robin CP, guiding even through scars. Queens got the glow, city anthem flows.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to another episode of Mets Hot Stove Live right here on both of our channels and on X, episode 10 of Mets Hot Stove. And we are getting closer and closer to the winter meetings, and more rumors are starting to fly out a little bit about certain relief pitching, starting pitching, talking to this guy, talking to that guy. But the big name free agent is still up for grabs, but we don't really have much to talk about with him at the moment. But we have a lot more to talk about since the last Hot Stove, as the Mets did make a signing, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Chris, how you doing tonight, buddy?
Good to be back home. It's great to be back home, actually, after the holiday, right in my usual setup. Hopefully the audio is better for you all. I got my nice backdrop here again. It's nice, man. I'm not going to lie to you. Do we have a Juan Soto free stream today? Is that what I'm hearing from you, Rob? Is that what I'm hearing? Listen, besides that, right? Hit the thumbs up as always. And can we get a little bit of a round of applause in the chat for Rob hitting 6K subs on the channel? Congrats to my guy, Rob. Major accomplishment. I know it's been a little bit of a time coming for you, so I wanted to salute you on the stream here for that. And listen, man, I'm ready to have a great discussion. We got the Frankie Montas signing and a couple of reports to talk about in between. Let's get after it.
Yep, sounds good to me, and thank you for congratulating me. And listen, I couldn't do it without you, Chris. I couldn't do it without everybody watching. Like, you know, if you guys don't watch, if Chris doesn't help, and others who've joined the channel at times hasn't helped, I wouldn't, be doing as decent as a job as I possibly can. So here we go, guys. Ready to start up Mets Hot Stove right now with the first topic, right? The Mets signed a pitcher for their rotation. First, basically, real signing that involves the 40-man or the 26-man roster in Frankie Montas, 2 years, $34 million with an opt-out. So basically 1 year, $17 million. And there was some Mets fans on Mets Twitter that kind of went ape shit crazy for whatever reason. Look, this is not a situation like last year where your big signings were Minaya and Severino. Now, if the end of the day, the Mets sign Minaya and, Buehler, I'm not sure if I'm going to be exactly excited about that rotation going into 2025. I mean, would it be solid? I guess, but I wouldn't be as excited as I thought I would be if you lose out on every big name free agent, even though some people are putting Minaya in the same realm as the other guys that we've been talking about, which I don't agree with. But Montas is a back end of the rotation type of guy, in a 6-man rotation, which we all believe that Stearns and the Mets are going to do this year to try to keep Kodai Senga healthy. He's going to be a 5th or 6th starter. Like, there's no question about that. And can he be good? Sure. I mean, what do you consider good? A 5th or 6th starter is what Montas gives you on a daily basis. He'll give you innings. He is a flamethrower. I know, Chris, you love the guys that throw 98, 99. That helps a little bit. But you're going to get between a 4.2, 4.5 ERA for your 5th or 6th starter. And look, I wasn't excited. I didn't jump off of my seat and can't wait to go live for that breaking news. But he is a quality innings guy. He's basically probably stepping in for Quintana at this point. And that's what we're going to need from him. We're going to need him to give you innings and give your team a chance to win every fifth day or sixth day in the Mets case. So, look, are we excited about it? No. But I think this is one of many sign-ins / trades to help this rotation. And you need depth. This puts McGill basically out of the rotation. This puts McGill as the 8th guy, 7th, 8th, maybe even 9th guy. If there's injuries. So it knocks out McGill out of the rotation automatically. So I want to get your thoughts, Chris, on the Montas signing. And do you think that this signing, and people think it's an overpay, so I want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, you know what? Listen, first of all, I dropped my instant reaction video, and I know you did as well on your channel. You can find my instant reaction video down in the description of my channel right now below, talking about this signing. You know what? I think that there's two sides of the fence here. I will say first off and foremost that initially when I first saw this signing, right, I was kind of like, oh, really, Frankie Montas, right? Yeah. And I think that's what a lot of Mets fans thought originally. And you know what? At the end of the day, it really is an overpay. Considering the market, it is an overpay. But again, as we've said time and time again, you are going to have to overpay for starting pitchers, whether it's giving up actual money capital for free agents. And the same thing could be said, and the precedent was already set with that Yusei Kikuchi signing. And I'm not saying that those pitchers are similar at all. That's not what I'm trying to say. But the precedent has been set that starting pitching is at a premium right now. And so you're going to have to pay that high dollar value. Last year, it was $13 million for Luis Severino. Last year is also $14 million AAV for Sean Manaea. And this year, you're already starting to see, right? I believe Boyd went to the Cubs for $14.5 million. Kikuchi gets $21 million. And Frankie Montas gets $17 million. The money isn't a big issue for the Mets, and it shouldn't be a big issue for us fans. So $17 million, I could care less at this point, right? It shocked me a little bit to see that player option for the second year, because if Frankie Montas has an abysmal time at it in 2025, obviously they're probably going to be locked into that 2026 deal for another $17 million. But again, with that, with it only being 2 years, I could see a situation if worst case scenario, he doesn't perform, you just buy his contract out. And the Mets have already done that in the past couple of seasons. And I'm sure they wouldn't be afraid to do it again. But we're talking worst case scenario here. Let's talk best case scenario, because again, the ceiling for Frankie Montas, as much as I like the Luis Severino signing before, while it happened in the offseason last season, right? I like this Frankie Montas signing in terms of the ceiling that he provides. And the ceiling of Frankie Montas could be even higher going into 2025 than Luis Severino's ceiling was going into 2024 with the New York Mets. You talk about a season where he was a Cincinnati Red and a Milwaukee Brewer. I know that he posted a 4.84 ERA. I understand that, but it really was a tale of two tapes. The Milwaukee Brewers, there was something in that organization that they were able to hone in on, they were able to queue up on and sort of fix with Frankie Montas for them to, bring out the best in him in terms of striking hitters out at a higher clip, which is exactly what we saw with the numbers and the K rate and the Ks per 9 for Frankie Montas as a Brewer. And I'm not sure if the Mets were targeting him all season or one of those late starts for the Brewers for Frankie Montas against the Mets in that one of the last, series of the season before the Mets headed to Atlanta kind of opened their eyes up. I believe he gave up 2 earned runs in the span of 4 innings pitched, and he looked pretty dominant with 6 strikeouts. He looked like he had good stuff. But again, You know as well as anybody, right, what I like as a starting pitcher, having that 95 to 97 mile per hour fastball in your back pocket. And I know that he's got a plethora of pitches. He's really a 5-pitch pitcher, but the splitter is something that I really need to stress to you all to continue to watch out for with Frankie Montas. In 2021, one of his better seasons in his career, he threw the splitter for 22+% in that season. The same thing for 2022 when he split time between the Athletics and the Yankees. He had a little bit of a better go at it with the Athletics, and the Yankees in his tenure over there in New York really wasn't anything. So hopefully he's able to come back to New York and re-emerge as sort of a dominant pitcher across side of town. But really, I take a look at the splitter usage for him in 2024 as a Cincinnati Red, as a Milwaukee Brewer at 18.3%. With that being his best pitch alongside the four-seamer, that percentage of how often he uses his splitter needs to go way up. And I'm expecting the pitching lab, and I'm expecting Jeremy Hefner and any other Mets pitching coach that's out there to go ahead and identify that and sort of just zero in on it, because I would not be shocked if the splitter, I guess I would be a little bit shocked if the splitter was his secondary pitch after his fastball, because I believe he also has a sinker that he uses at a very high rate. And it's kind of hard to get off of the 4-seam, 2-seam combination. But if it's the true off-speed pitch, right, above the slider that he possesses or above any other pitch, I do think the splitter is going to be shown early and often. And I do think that in the first couple of months of this upcoming 2025 season, we will get a real feel for what they've been working on with him in spring training, etc., and kind of foreshadowing the type of season that he's going to have. Quite simple. I agree with you. There's a couple of other rotation spots to fill for the New York Mets, and we'll talk about Walker Buehler. Obviously, we'll talk about Clay Holmes here. By the way, I dropped the Clay Holmes video on my channel just an hour ago. The link's in my description as well down below if you missed it. But I'm kind of getting a sense here that instead of going after the top of the line free agents or maybe even trade targets, maybe the Mets are deploying this, I don't want to say Dodgers-esque, because they just got Blake Snell. They got Tyler Glasnow the offseason before. But maybe they're trying to accumulate arms in general, and they're trying to have this blend of guys that can be in the rotation and the bullpen, and just having that kind of mix and match for the 2025 season. And the only reason I say that is because you already have Jose Butto that was kind of that back and forth platoon between the rotation and the bullpen last season, but also you have a report in being interested in a guy like Mike Soroka, right, who spent last season in the White Sox organization as a starter and a reliever. You had Sean Manaea, who did the same thing for the Giants in 2023. And then the season after, David Stearns went out to get him. There's a certain, I don't want to say aura, but like there's a certain vibe that I'm getting out of the Mets right now and David Stearns in terms of accumulating pitchers that are capable of doing both, being those that maybe a rotation piece or maybe a bullpen piece. And that's the same thing that we'll talk about with Clay Holmes as we get into that topic here in just a second. But you know what, Rob? At the end of the day, I have to assume that there is a clear path for the Mets to re-sign Sean Manaea, and there's a clear path perhaps to either sign or trade for another ace alongside Kodai Senga. And Frankie Montas, right, is going to be a number 5 for you. David Peterson's going to be the 4. And if everything holds true, Paul Blackburn would be your number 6 starter. And if you go into a season with those guys as your 4, 5, 6, I think that there are worse avenues you can take starting the 2025 season out.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that because, we all think it's going to be a 6-man rotation. And, as of right now, right, Blackburn's probably not going to be ready for opening day, as I think Joe DeMeo also said that on the podcast the other day. So you're not going to see him probably, I would say, if he gets ramped up in April, May, you might see him late May, early June. So, that's something that that's down the road. So as of right now, you got 3 starters right now. You got David Peterson, you got Senga, and you got Montas. So you just assume that you can still sign a Manaea or a Buehler, and that can be your 3, 4, 5, 6 right there. and then still go after that big ace if it's through free agency or trade, I still think they're going to make a big move for a top line starter. I think it's I truly I don't believe the Mets think that Senga is a number one. I don't believe he is. I don't think you can trust him enough to do that. He's coming off a year where he was completely injured, and there's no guarantee of that with all the innings that he's thrown in Japan. And he basically, I know it was weird injuries this year that caused him to miss a lot of the season or most of the season. I still feel like they're going to do that. Now, I think they can, mess around with, Buehler, Minaya. They can work, Buehler and maybe somebody like another Montas or something like that. I feel like when Montas went to the Brewers, he had a run lower ERA. The Brewers system is what David Stearns put into place. I was looking at it the other day, like the pitching lab that the Brewers actually have that is similar to the Mets pitching lab, which is more sophisticated because of the Cohen money. But the Brewers in their minor league system has a pitching lab, or in their facilities have a pitching lab as well. And it seems to help with certain guys like Montas, especially guys with splitters. And, that there's no shock that guys that, throw, more of that breaking ball or that hard cutter or that hard splitter, it seems to, they figure something out when it comes to that pitching lab. And the Brewers system is part of the David Stearns system as well. So I do wonder if they're hoping that Montas can, I'm not saying become a Severino, as good as Severino was this year, but if he can be a solid number 4, numbers wise, but is our number 6 starter, I think you could be okay with that. And it's an overpay, but you're going to pay for average pitch. You're going to overpay for average pitching. That, same thing last year. How many people thought it was an overpay for Severino last year? You're going to get average pitchers get a few $1 million less than the qualifying offer. That's just how it goes every year, right? Yusei Kikuchi got the qualifying offer for 3 years, $21 million. Like, that's an overpay for an average pitcher, and he has similar numbers to Montas. It's not that much of a difference, and Montas got $17 million. So I'm not going to go crazy as of yet. I think if you do get Minaya and Buehler, I think that's a great 3, 4, 5, 6 right there. And, Senga can be your number 2, and I still think they're going to go after a number 1. I'd be crazy to think if they don't, and we'll get into that a little further.
Can I say something though, I as much as I like Severino, and I was a big fan of Severino, anybody that's been on this channel long enough, on your channel, my channel, or wherever watching this podcast knows that. I really do think that Montas has, again, as I just mentioned in my whole entire go around spiel here, he has a higher ceiling to produce better numbers than Severino did in 2024. And that's where I was just like, I looked at the signing for what it was and I slept on it, right? Because I was just like, it was a late signing. And then I was like, let me think about this for a second, right? Another reclamation project, another, maybe potential for Stearns to strike gold twice, another project for the Mets and their coaching staff to work on to try to get to Montas's peak potential, which we saw in his Oakland Athletics days, right? Which is why the Yankees went out and got him in the first place. And now I'm like, thinking about it, and I'm like, I can't get my mind past $17 million. But as soon as I was able to get my mind past $17 million, which is virtually nothing to the Mets in general, and that's why I think a lot of people are getting hung up on $17 million. Why do we care what these pitchers are getting paid? The Angels just paid Yusei Kikuchi $21 million, right? The Cubs just dished out $14.5 million for Boyd. I mean, that's an overpay too within itself. Pitching is going to cost you, whether it's prospect capital for the top of the line guys that we've already talked about in Castillo or Crochet, right? Or these midline pitchers, right? These tier C, tier B guys, like it's going to cost you money. And that's due to a multitude of factors. But again, past the money factor, right? Just taking a look at the arsenal of pitches that he has, the splitter that he's been successful with, and the fastball velocity, I think that there's a lot of untapped potential. And if he is, completely past, some of the injuries that he sustained over the past couple of years, I'm talking about Montas, obviously, while we're still on the topic, I really do think that if you are slotting him in and planning for him to be a starting pitcher 4 or 5, listen, I mean, I'm fine with it. And I think that, you talk about championship caliber rotations. I think that you can build a championship caliber rotation even with Montas as your 4th or 5th option. I truly do.
Yeah, and I've said this from the beginning for a while now. People are so fixated that pitcher wins championship. It doesn't anymore. It really doesn't. Now, you need somebody to step up in the playoffs, but you don't need a full rotation to step up in the playoffs. You just don't anymore. The Rangers 2 years ago won the World Series. Can anybody name 3 pitchers that went past the 5th inning? And I brought this up last season. None of the pitchers went past the 5th inning, and that was Evaldi, and that was other guys that they brought in. Nobody went past the 5th inning in the World Series. Nobody. So starting pitch, you need quality starting pitching. You need pitchers to go out there every 5th inning and give your team a chance to win. Every now and then you would love a gem, but baseball's not played like that anymore, right? They can't wait to take these starters out now after the 5th inning, maybe the 6th inning. And you're kind of pushing into the 6th inning now. You need quality starting pitching. And that's why you might be right on the sense where they might not get a big-time arm, right? They might put Manaea and Kodai Senga as their 1-2. And then, go forward with like a Buehler and then Peterson and then Montas and something, in that combination. I think you need quality starters. I think you go guys that can give you the 5-6 innings, give you 2 to 3 runs every single game, and you have a good chance of winning, especially if you have an offense that might be including Soto and Alonso and maybe throw a little bit more offense along with the Lindor and Nimmo and Vientos and Alvarez, right? If you could, and I said this last offseason too, if you could score between 4.5 and 5 runs per game and most of your pitchers average around 2 to 3 runs per game, you're going to win a lot of those games, right? You don't need shutouts. You don't need a 1-run game from a pitcher where he goes 7 innings and 1 run. We'll take it. But how much, they glorify that now. Like it's a huge accomplishment now when it got, 7 2/3, 1 inning. Wow, great job. Like that was the norm 15 years ago. It's not the norm anymore, right? We got to get, a lot of people got to get past, especially the generation that love pitching and thought pitching wins you championships. And it was a while back, but it's not that way anymore. And I think we have to be careful on what we're looking at now and how championships are won now. Championships are won now with offense. It's just that simple, right? I don't like it, but it's a reality. And that's just the way you have to look at it.
The Dodgers just proved that. The Dodgers just proved that. How many bullpen games did they throw out there in the 2024 postseason? And again, you talk about stacking arms. I know that rotation is going to come back to form because they have Glass now. They have Yamamoto, right? They have Shohei Ohtani coming back pitching for them. But again, take a look at their rotation in 2024 and how just injured they were and how they were just piecing puzzle pieces together, right? And it was just kind of like a shit show for them, right? For the majority of the season going into the playoffs, and they still got it done because they are a powerhouse when it comes to the lineup and when it comes to putting runs together. At no point in any of those games in that National League Championship Series, I was content with any lead that the Mets had, right? Not any single time in the 2 games that they were able to take. So again, right, it's just like, you build an offense and the pitching will follow. And you don't necessarily have to have the top of the line pitching showing up for you. You have to have guys that are out there catching fire at the right time and have the ability to be flexible. And that's the key word, is being flexible in terms of being an opener, or in the case of Walker Buehler, being able to go out there and start, and then literally a couple days after that, going out of the bullpen and closing out a ball game. Like this is kind of like where baseball is going for me. And I know it's going to take some time to completely transition to that, but I really do think with the way that the starting pitchers are right now, unless we don't see a change in these pitchers going deep into the ball game, right? And we've seen already just a massive shift of pitchers just, going 3, 4, 5 innings, and then boom, you're done. Let's throw the bullpen in there. Get arms. And this is where I'm talking about the philosophy. If the Mets are truly interested in Buehler, play Holmes, Mike Soroka to go along with a guy like Frankie Montas, maybe re-signing Manaea, get arms that could be assets to you. Right? You can still get maybe, you'll still have Kodai Senga and you could still get a top of the line starter, but you can backfill your rotation in a plethora of different varieties with guys that can be flexible, either starting for you or coming out of the bullpen. And I'm not saying that's going to work for every single team. I'm not saying even that's going to work for the New York Mets in 2025. But again, with the way that the pitching is going, if that's the Mets route, I can at least start to see that vision, right? I'm not cut off and I'm not naive to that vision. I will at least, I'm not saying I necessarily agree with it either, right? It's still going to take me some time to warm up to, but I can see it at the very minimum on the horizon.
Correct. And King brought some up in the comments. He says, great pitching will shut down great offense. That's not true anymore, right? The Dodgers faced the Padres. The Padres had one of the best pitching rotations going into the playoffs this year, right? How did that work out for them? They didn't get past the divisional round. So, it's not true. It's just not how it goes anymore, right? You have to have every one of your pitchers be on during those series. And if they're not, you're in trouble. It's not the same anymore. I know we're still falling into that little, that little section of baseball where we still believe pitching wins you championships and pitching overtakes great offensive. It's really not true anymore, because look what the Mets did. How many times had the Mets got good starters out of the game early and then got to their bullpen, right? You make them throw a ton of pitches. They're coming out in the 5th inning, even if it's their ace of the staff. That's the way it works.
Then the bullpen comes in and shuts down the New York Mets. You're right?
Correct.
Exactly.
Yeah, King, I understand you can't hit, you can't score, but again, more often than not, offense is taking a new trajectory over the last couple of seasons, like over the last 5 to 6 years. Offense has taken over. It's like the NFL, where it used to be defense wins you championships. Not true anymore, right? You got to outscore the opponent now. It's rare that defensive teams that don't have good offensive wins the Super Bowl or goes in a deep run in the playoffs. It just doesn't happen anymore. That's the way it goes, right? The same thing with hockey nowadays, right? The NHL tried so hard to increase offense because defense was shutting down everybody, and there was 1-0, 2-1 games, and now you're seeing 4 or 5 goals a game for most teams, and offense continues to step up another level in baseball, right? The Braves, go back to the Braves of 2021, right? It was their offense. It wasn't the pitching. Their pitching was awful. Their starting pitching was, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was around the 4.5 ERA in the World Series. It was terrible, right? The Astros had a better rotation. Why didn't they win? Because offense surmounted that. And that's what we have to understand. And again, I'm not saying pitching is going to, you need somebody to step up, right? Right? Yamamoto stepped up in the World Series, but he was basically the only one that basically did anything. Right. And that's what you have to understand. And to get to the playoffs, you don't need a dominant starting staff. You just don't anymore. Right. You just need one guy or maybe two to step up in the postseason. Right. Manaea stepped up in the postseason. Right. Quintana stepped up in the postseason. That's why the Mets got the Game 6 in the NLCS. It wasn't because of Severino. It wasn't because anybody else in the rotation. It was, or Kodai Senga for that matter. Right. It was Manaea stepping up. And it was Jose Quintana. Jose Quintana probably had the best quality starts in the postseason for the New York Mets. Who would have thought that? So you just need guys to step up when that time comes. And the quality starting pitching surmounts one ace, and then everybody else is a bunch of, has-beens or a bunch of mediocre pitchers. That's just
And look at the Phillies. They had Zach Wheeler. They lost game 1, dominant pitcher. The Mets didn't have any Zach Wheeler on their staff going into this past playoffs. And guess what? The Phillies offense faltered, and they didn't even get to a game 5. They couldn't even get Zach Wheeler back on the mound. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and just look, the NLCS this year, it was the Dodgers and the Mets. Look at the two teams that lost in the NLDS, the Padres and the Phillies. Two teams that had better pitching staffs than the Mets, rotations than the Mets. It's just a fact. So not saying that that's the clear cut way to win games in the playoffs or win a World Series. I'm not saying that's the only way, right? There's a lot of ways to win, but the last few seasons, it's been the offense over the pitching. And you just need a couple of dominant guys in the bullpen, and quality starts in the postseason. That's just how it goes. So speaking on pitching and keeping up with that topic of pitching, rumors are that the Mets have spoke with and have a lot of interest in Walker Buehler. And a lot of people are very excited about that, right? I think that would be a great sign. A second year after Tommy John reminds me of, and I'm not saying Walker Buehler is Zach Wheeler, but you've seen guys that had stuff. Walker Buehler had stuff like Zach Wheeler. Walker Buehler was a dominant pitcher. And I'm not saying he's going to get to that point again, but a second year from Tommy John is where that next step comes for that starting pitcher, where they feel comfortable throwing the ball. They're not worrying about their arm blowing up. I think Walker Buehler would be a perfect signing for the New York Mets. Other teams as well, of course, but for specifically the Mets, Walker Buehler is the guy to get, in my opinion. I honestly, if I have to choose between Walker Buehler or Sean Manaea, I might have to go Walker Buehler, to be quite honest with you, if I have to choose. And I'll give you my reason, but let me give you my reason. The reason why is because we're going to too many Mets fans are going to expect Sean Manaea to do what he did last year. I don't think he's going to do that again. Because there's more teams looking at him and have a lot more video of him with his new mechanics, right? And sometimes that is not always good for the pitcher. Now, can he be as good as he was? Sure. But I don't think so. And I think he's probably going to push out a 4-year deal from somebody. And I think the Mets are going to be a little hesitant to do that. And Walker Buehler is probably going to get you on a 2-year deal, probably cheaper than Sean Manaea. Because Sean Manaea is probably going to bring in probably between $23 to $25 million because he was, he's going to get a few $1 million more than Kikuchi because he was better than Kikuchi. So in my opinion, if I had to choose, I would have to go Walker Buehler. I know that might annoy a little bit of people, but I don't think you can have that recency bias with certain pitchers. Now, would I be mad if it's Manaea over Walker Buehler? No. But if I had to choose, I think Walker Buehler probably has more upside because we talked about Montas and his stuff. Walker Buehler's stuff is better than Sean Manaea's. And I think there's more of an upgrade. I think there's more of a higher ceiling of Walker Buehler becoming what he was or close to it than what Sean Manaea was last year, in my opinion, Chris.
So I don't know if I would go as far as to say I wouldn't sign Sean Manaea because of Walker Buehler. What I will say is that even though that there is an inverse regression going over the past couple of seasons and what we've seen from Walker Buehler, I understand that it has been an injury-riddled couple of past seasons for Buehler, and it's unfortunate because when he first came into the league, again, you talk about a guy that we might talk about as well, and Mike Soroka, just like polarizing figures in the league coming up, and then just injury-riddled over the past couple of seasons. But, you take a look at the walk rate, it has gone up the last 3 seasons. You take a look at the K rate, it's gone down for his past 3 seasons that he's appeared in. I believe he didn't pitch in 2023 or 2022, Walker Buehler, that is. But again, it doesn't really matter. Again, in the last 3 seasons that he has pitched, injury aside, K rate down, walk rate up. But again, the reason why you take a chance on a guy like this is because of his stuff. As you just mentioned, he's a 6-pitch arsenal type of pitcher. He possesses 6 pitches, and really 3 of those are really going to get you to the promised land, or hopefully get him to the promised land in terms of success. And one of those is his slider/sweeper, right? Great break on it. And I really do think that he's going to start to utilize that more. And if it's one thing that we know about David Stearns, whether we're talking about a guy like Soroka or whether we're talking about a guy like Clay Holmes, right? He loves guys that have sliders. So it's no doubt in my mind that we're seeing these types of reports because guess what? These guys possess sliders and David Stearns loves that. So again, it's not a coincidence. What I will say though is that in terms of the flexibility, as we just talked about, and as we just talked about stacking pitching assets on your team, you can go ahead and re-sign Sean Manaea while also signing Walker Buehler to a 1 or 2 year deal, right? You can do both. And you know what? I will say, what if there's an inverse of a situation that happens, you know, inversely to the reports of Clay Holmes? What if Walker Buehler is the next great bullpen option coming from a starting role, right? Again, I'm not sure that he's going to want to sign to a team out of the gates being promised a bullpen role only. So you might have to commit to Walker Buehler getting a rotation spot. But in the event that he doesn't perform as a starter, there is always a world, as we saw in, you know, come playoff time, and especially come World Series time last year for the Dodgers against the Yankees in the World Series, right? Like, this guy could be electric for 1, maybe even 2 innings out of the bullpen. That could be a great asset. So when we get into our next topic of conversation of Clay Holmes going from, you know, a bullpen guy to a starter, how about we think about doing the inverse with Walker Buehler and having that sort of scenario? Again, all of this to say, stacking pitching assets and just plugging and playing thereafter, whether it's in the rotation or the bullpen, could be the best move for the New York Mets if they are unwilling. If, I want to emphasize the word if, because again, they could go down this route, or they can just go ahead and sign one of the top guys and trade for another top guy and have a solidified 1, 2, 3, or they can just use that money that they would sign those 3 guys, right? Whether it's a Crochet extension, whether it's a Burns long-term deal, and just get 3, 4, maybe even 5 guys that just have that flexibility of doing both and being both types of pitchers for you. So again, I'm not saying that's the route they're going to take. I'm still trying to evaluate which route I want to see the Mets go down, because having a solidified top 3 sounds great to me. But then I take a look at what the Dodgers were able to accomplish, and I'm like, man, could we allocate more money to the offense and in other aspects of this team while just getting these types of pitchers that are flexible and can do both for you and still being successful a la the 2024 Dodgers? I don't know, man. It's an interesting topic of conversation. All I'm asking is for Mets fans to at least open up the door of possibility in their minds if, keyword emphasis on if, that's what the Mets are doing, because we just don't know yet. We just don't know.
Yeah, I think some people think that, you know, if the Mets get Buehler and Manaea, that they're automatically done with the rotation. I don't think they are. I think Stearns knows that an ace is important. A top line starter is important, right? He always had that with the Brewers, right? He made sure that there was at least one ace, one big guy in that rotation, and then you can, you know, really mix and match what you got to do beyond the other guys in a rotation. You know, he always had Burns, right? That was his key right there. Now you can work around other ways to fit your rotation the way you want to, with a reclamation project in Montas, or a Buehler who's coming off of Tommy John 2 years ago, that might have that next level, that next step, that higher ceiling that you can work with as well. That's you know, there's a lot of ways to work with it here. And again, why don't we trust David Stearns? Like, people are going nuts, yet this is the guy we all wanted to run the New York Mets. This is what we wanted, right? Trust the process. Trust this guy. He's not doing anything just out of like thin air here. He's well thought of. He thinks about this stuff. He processes this stuff. He uses the analytics. He uses probably all types of other craziness, and a lot of people that are working with him to make these signings, right? And somebody brought up, Montas and Manaea are extremely good friends. They work out in the offseason. Obviously, they grew up together in the A's system. They pitched together in the A's system, as an Oakland A and as well. So people are thinking that, they signed Montas. It's a good sign that they can sign Sean Manaea. I'm not going to go that deep into it, but it's a possibility. But I think we're looking too much into like, it'll be Buehler and Montas and Manaea and Senga and Peterson and all that stuff. It's a quality rotation. It's nothing special, but all you need is somebody to turn out like Manaea, and now you got an ace. Now, I don't like to put that as a question mark and put that as a hopeful, wishful thinking there in that process, because I don't think you can be going for it in 2025 as they said they are going to do. They were looking at 2025 as being a contender, and tell me that you don't have a true ace. Like, I don't see that as a true contender, to be quite honest with you. Maybe they have a different way of doing things, but I don't see that as a true contender. When you have the Phillies have Wheeler, right? You look at other teams around baseball that make the playoffs every year. They have an ace. They have a true ace, not somebody that pops up out of nowhere like the Sean Manaea and becomes your ace. So, but we'll see, right? I do think the Mets are going to try hard to get Walker Buehler. I think it's a Buehler is a perfect Stearns guy, in my opinion. And, there's so much upside with Buehler as he's younger than most of the guys that we were talking about, a couple of years younger. And I still think there's more in the tank, especially 2 years after Tommy John. I think that's a big thing for a lot of starting pitchers, as it's the mental game as well, that they can just let it loose and make sure their arm doesn't fall off. So it's going to be very interesting, especially these winter meetings, because I wouldn't be shocked if you see a Manaea come off the board, a Buehler come off the board, and that leaves, Burns still there, Fried still there, Crochet as a trade target, Castillo, and who knows what other starting pitching that we don't even know about yet. That could be an ace that might be on the market that we haven't heard about yet or hasn't been reported as of yet, Chris.
Yeah, no, I agree. By the way, before I make my actual point, Martino, just from what I saw in my notifications from the SNY Mets account, is kind of reconfirming what we said last week, in that everything that Martino hears right now is saying that Soto will be signing and making a decision before the winter meetings. Before the winter meetings. So this week, ladies and gentlemen, we could be nearing a Juan Soto decision. So I know that this offense has been kind of geared towards that. I know that we've been kind of shying away from the Juan Soto discussion this stream, but there you have it. What I will say is that I'm not advocating, and this is what I kind of, and Carlos kind of brought it up too, is that I'm trying to just stay both sides of the fence here. And I'm trying to open up the viewers, minds to the fact that the Mets could go down having 6, 7, 8, different starters on the roster that could play both sides of the bullpen and being a starting pitcher. There's only so many roster spots and so many pitching roster spots to go out on the 26 man, which is 13. So again, would I love to have a top of the line starter alongside Kodai Senga to provide some insurance should he go down with another injury in the worst case scenario? Yes, I would. I would love to have a Crochet or a Castillo or a Burns or a Fried on my team. Again, the trade route for me with what David Stearns has shown us is a little bit more realistic than handing out a 5, 6, 7-year deal for a starting pitcher. And that's kind of the shift in focus that I'm going to start, I guess, prioritizing given what Stearns is showing us. And again, that's what I would prefer to have happen. But if all these reports, and I'm not saying all these reports are true, but if all these reports have any validity to them, you might have to kiss one of those top of the line starters goodbye and maybe just build a rotation behind Kodai Senga, right? Of your co-ace being Sean Manaea, and then you just plugging and playing Buehler. I'm not saying Holmes is going to fit into that category, but maybe Holmes, Montas, Blackbird. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a different way to go about it. And I know that's not the sexiest of routes to go. And I know that's going to cause a lot of uncertainty. It would cause a lot of uncertainty in my mind as well, right? I would honestly be a little bit cautious in terms of having full confidence in the Mets rotation if they went that way. So I understand that. But all I'm trying to do is just think of that philosophy and if that's a realistic approach. And I just wanted to at least open that avenue and that door for you viewers here in the chat, whether you're in my chat or whether you're in Rob's chat, to sort of internalize that and ponder for that, ponder on that for yourselves. That's all I was trying to do with that, because it's realistic. By the way, please do hit the thumbs up button on both streams. Shameless plug, subscribe to both channels, both Rob and mine. We appreciate you being here. And shout out John for the super chat here.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring up John. I apologize. I lost your super chat. I was trying to look for it, and I finally found it again. I hope they add 1 or 2 top order rotation guys. I'm gonna tell you this right now. It's gonna be 1, if at all. Like, it's not gonna be 2. If it's 2, I'd be shocked. And the only way I could see it would be 2 is if they sign a Max Fried that's probably going to be a 4-year deal or so, and trade for Castillo or Crochet. That would be insane and probably very unlikely. But I think you could see 1 top of the rotation, guys. John, but thank you for the super chat, by the way. Yeah, I don't think that's the way to go, Chris. When it comes to, I don't think that's the way they're going to go, and I wouldn't be happy, because there's too much hoping things go right, hoping guys have turnaround seasons, and different seasons that they had in the past. I think there's too much hope involved. When you're saying that 2025 is the year you're contending, even 2024, what it was, we'll put that to the side. They talked about 2025 being the year they're going for it. You can't say you're going for it all offseason last year, all throughout the season until the Mets make the playoffs, and then throw Kodai Senga out there as your ace of the staff, and a Buehler and a Manaea and Peterson and Montas, and tell me that that's going for it, because it's not. It really isn't. Now, can they do something like that at the trade deadline? Sure. But what if that rotation is an absolute disaster for the first couple of months of the season, and you're struggling to stay afloat again, and hoping for the trade deadline to bring that big arm to help you guys out? Right? You don't want to fall behind again, 11 games under, and well out away from the many games out of the playoffs, and have to fight your way through because guys broke down at the end because they fought so hard to get back to that spot. And I think you're playing with fire there. And again, you can't say you're going for it and this is the year and give me that type of rotation. Is it a bad rotation? No. But is it good enough to where you ultimate goal wants to be, and that's a World Series? You can't go to Game 6 of the NLCS and tell me World Series isn't the next step. And you're going to tell me that rotation is good enough to get there? I mean, it might be, especially if you do sign a Juan Soto, bring back Alonso, and your offense is much better. But I don't know. I think you're playing with too much fire there. And I think Stearns knows that, though. I think he knows that. Like, I don't think, like, he's worked with an ace throughout his executive career. So I think it's, I don't take too much into last year and what he did, saying that that's what he's going to do this year. So, at least to this point, if it ends up being that, I'm not going to be happy. But again, am I going to, bitch and moan about it? No, because you have to trust Stern in his process when it comes to that. And speaking of his process, what is this whole idea of making Clay Holmes a starter, right? I think it's so idiotic, Chris. Why? I think it's so idiotic because he hasn't been a starter since Pittsburgh. He hasn't had a season from start to finish where he was a starter since Pittsburgh, since the minor league days in the Pittsburgh organization. Why do people believe that Clay Holmes, who was a closer for the Yankees the last couple of seasons, who pitched late in ball games as a bullpen arm late in the season into the playoffs for the Yankees and was really good when they got out of the closer role in the 7th and 8th inning role. Why would somebody give Clay Holmes 3 or 4 years and throw him in the rotation? Like, I don't understand that at all. I think he's a guy that sits perfectly between the 6th and 8th inning role in the bullpen, and you're going to get a very good bullpen arm. Again, this is the whole thing about playing with fire again. You're risking too much. Where can Clay Holmes be a really good starter? Sure. I mean, I guess you could say that. And I think why teams, because it's not just the Mets looking at Clay Holmes as a starter, it's other teams as well that has been reported. I think they see his 4-pitch pitching, his 4 set of pitches that mostly starters has, that his repertoire can make him a starting pitcher. And I guess that's the way people are looking at it. But I just see a guy that can be a dominant 6th, 7th, 8th inning guy, and you're risking too much to put him in the rotation. I mean, I guess if he's a failed rotation guy, you could put him in the bullpen. But if you're signing him to put him in the rotation, that means that one of those guys that you might be looking at, like a Buehler, a Severino, a Manaea, is not going to be a target now because you're going to put Clay Holmes as a starter. So would I be willing to do that? No. I want Clay Holmes as a bullpen guy if the Mets are going to get him, Chris.
Yeah, no, I agree. And before I even actually talk about that, this should piss off a lot of Mets fans, if not every single Mets fan in this chat. Fabian Ardaya, who covers the Dodgers for The Athletic, just tweeted out a quote from Andrew Friedman, who's the Pobo of the Dodgers. Andrew Friedman on the Blake Snell signing. If you can't beat him, just have him join us. That should piss off every single Met fan known to man. That just pissed me off reading that.
That's what I call him.
Yeah, that just pissed me off. So keep that in the back of your heads, Mets fans, about that quote right there. Anyways, again, that's a separate discussion. Regarding Clay Holmes, this report absolutely shocked me. It absolutely shocked me when I saw this because, again, I mean, I understand that he does have the ability to throw 4 pitches. He really only throws 3 pitches. He doesn't throw his 4-seam fastball all that often. If you look at the pitch usage in 2024, he only threw his 4-seam fastball 0.2% of the time, right? Because he heavily relies on the sinker slider combination. So, I know that there's some willingness to add the changeup into his game. I know that you could potentially have him throw the fastball at a higher usage rate, or the 4-seam fastball, that is, and he could become a 5-pitch pitcher. I know that he came up in the Pittsburgh Pirates organization as a starting pitcher and started, 15 innings worth of games in 2018 as a starting pitcher before going to the bullpen and having a plethora of success in the bullpen for both the Pirates and the Yankees. But again, this is another project, so to speak, just as Montas is, because again, as highly as we just talked about Montas, it's still a project. He's still a project, just as Severino was, just as Manaea was. And if you're going to have 2 of those guys in your rotation trying to get from the League Championship Series up until the World Series, it's a hard sell. But what I will say is that the guy that we talked about in terms of running a 6-man rotation not being available for you in the first couple months of the season, if you replace Paul Blackburn with a guy like Clay Holmes and test him out as a starter for the first couple months of the season before Blackburn is ready, then you can make a realistic, opinion or a hypothesis, not even a hypothesis, just based off of how he does in the first couple of months of the season as a starter, whether you want to keep him there or whether you want to transition him back to the bullpen, which would at that point be honestly an elite bullpen. I would love that bullpen with Buto, with Holmes, Diaz, Garrett, and maybe another signing or 2 in that bullpen. But again, that's really the only realistic scenario that I see, because Montas, we're talking about as a fourth or fifth option. We're talking about potentially re-signing Manaea as well. Where is the room for Clay Holmes? How many projects are too many projects for the Mets in 2025? That is a realistic and valid question to ask. So if you're asking me, the only scenario that I see with this being a potential project to move Holmes back into a rotation a la Seth Lugo, Reynaldo Lopez, maybe even like a Jordan Hicks for the Giants, right? Is that you have a sixth rotation spot up for grabs. You've got Blackburn, who you just said might not be ready in time. That could be the perfect scenario of where you throw in Clay Holmes to see what he's got. But again, we're talking about a guy that is projected to be a guy that takes home $55 to $56 million over 3 to 4 years. Rob, are you going to commit to Clay Holmes for a multi-year contract without knowing whether he's going to be a starter or a bullpen guy for you? That's something that I simply don't. I can't see that being a realistic option, knowing the track record that Stearns has, as much as I want to give Holmes that opportunity, because I do see a path where he can be successful in that light. I don't know if Stearns is gonna be, I don't think he's gonna fall for that, if I'm just being completely honest here.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess Stearns might be being okay with that, considering the fact that it's been out there that they're talking about him as a starter, and maybe you're right. Put him in the rotation until Blackburn comes back, and then you throw him in the bullpen, and he's worth the money because he could be a Swiss Army knife for you, during the season. I guess. I mean, that's what I don't understand. Like Clay Holmes is gonna probably look for closer type money, right? And even if he doesn't get a team that's or anybody's going to give him closer type money, he's going to get around the 30, probably 40 to $50 million range over 3 to 4 years, because he is a really damn good bullpen arm. And if you need a closer, he can be solid. I know he gives up a ton of home runs, but that was that Yankees, that was with the Yankees, and most of the time in a bandbox, he basically gave up a lot of home runs at Yankee Stadium closing out games. But I find it odd why teams are doing that. Are they would you rather sign Fried for another 30, 40, $50 million more, knowing that he can be an ace of your staff and be a rotation guy and guaranteed rotation guy? To save a few dollars here and there really doesn't make sense, where Clay Holmes is clearly a very good bullpen arm. And, maybe this is, agent news that has been rumored out with Clay Holmes about a starter, because starters make the big bucks. I mean, maybe that's a possibility, and they're just talking about teams that need starters and bullpen arms. I don't know. It's very odd. And when I heard that report, I was like, what? Why? That's something that I would see the Reds do. Teams that the third tier teams that that don't really have a rotation, that can just throw a guy in there, and if he becomes a really good starter, they can trade him at the deadline. That's the teams that I would say would pick up Clay Holmes to be a starter, not the Mets, not the Yankees, not teams that need rotation arms. It just doesn't make sense to me to pay 40, 50, $60 million for a guy who's clearly a bullpen arm to put in your rotation to hopefully give you 4 or 5 innings. It's just stupid to me. And, with John, thank you for the super chat. He says, Stearns has said you don't need an ace to compete. He said that last year, if I'm not mistaken. He hasn't really said that this offseason. Last offseason, he said that. The reason why he said that, because, well, they didn't have an ace. When Kodai Senga got hurt, and the Mets started to win, that's when he really said it. So I don't take that for anything. I think if he can get an ace, he will, because he lived with an ace for most of the time as the GM of the Brewers. So
to be clear, I do think the Mets are still going to get an ace, right? I still think they're going to go out there and get an ace. I would count on it being more the trade route, rather than the free agent route. But in terms of this Clay Holmes discussion, again, I can see a world where Clay Holmes is successful as a starter, but with the contract that he's still going to want, I don't see it being with the New York Mets, because the only scenario where that fits for the New York Mets in order to have that project play out is the first couple of months of the season, while a guy like Paul Blackburn, or maybe even a guy like, I guess any prospect in the Mets organization, right? I mean, whoever you want to throw out there as a starting pitcher to come up for them is getting ready to take on that sixth starter role, right? It doesn't really make sense to me. I don't think Stearns is going to take that gamble. So again, as much as I would like Clay Holmes, I would like Clay Holmes as a bullpen guy strictly. I think that he has a role anywhere in this league as a bullpen guy, not as a closer, right? Not as a closer for most teams, but especially not as a closer for the New York Mets. I would maybe slot him in as an 8th or 7th inning guy. I think you have Clay Holmes, Reed Garrett, and Edwin Diaz in the back end of your bullpen. You're cooking. But at this point of time, if Spotrac is projecting him out to have a 4-year contract worth $50+ million, there's no world, in my opinion, if we're even contemplating even re-signing Sean Manaea for a 4-year deal, we're going to re-sign a guy, or we're going to sign a guy like Clay Holmes. There's just no way that I see that happening. Again, projectability is there, and I like it, but with the money value, with the years value, I don't see it happening, Mets fans. I simply don't.
Yeah, I just think it's very odd. And to lead on your point about Andy Martino, talking about that there's reports coming out that he's going to sign prior to the winter meetings. He also said final offers are being placed for Juan Soto, and there is belief that he will make a decision this week. So the final offers are coming in from the teams that are very interested in Juan Soto, and everybody believes it's the Mets, Yankees, Red Sox, and Blue Jays. I mean, maybe there'll be a mystery team that pops up, but you would think it's the 4 teams that are probably. But you know, Chris, you know, I know we're leading off track a little bit, and we weren't going to really get into much Soto talk, but you know, reports come out. What are we going to do?
Let's do it.
Why haven't we heard any offers? Like, the final offers are coming in, but we haven't heard of the first offers, and some teams that made second offers over the last week and a half. Why haven't we heard any numbers or any years? Like, something's going on between agent and team where they don't want nothing leaked out at all when it comes to offers being made and the years and numbers. I don't understand why that is. I know we talked about that a little last off hot stove, but why do you think there hasn't been any rumored numbers? I mean, except for the fake accounts, but like real reporters, we haven't heard of the years or any dollar amount. Why do you think that is?
Did we hear those numbers outside of $700 million for Ohtani? I'm not sure we did.
I mean, there was offers out there where there was like the Dodgers offer was out there. The Blue Jays really technically never really, I mean, they made offers, but the offers weren't out there until like when they were following his plane to Toronto, so to speak. That's when we heard their real number. But like, we haven't heard anything, right? We heard that it might be over $600 million, which is not really a report. I think that's common sense that it was going to be over $600 million. So, like, I just don't know. It's like, I mean, you would think one reporter, like a Jeff Passan or somebody, would find a amount of years or dollar amount, because, like, unless teams are so afraid of another team coming in and one-upping them, but Scott Boras is going to go to the other team and say, listen, the Mets gave us this. What are you going to do? So they're going to know the number. The teams that are involved know the numbers and the years that other teams are offering. So to not have anything rumored, I think there's a little bit of a promise between the teams that are involved and Scott Boras saying, hey, if you want us to mess around with your other clients, don't leak these numbers or these years. It seems like there's like a little bit of a, you know, handshake deal of not leaking anything, because that's the only thing I can think of.
I mean, well, what is the advantage of that really though? Because they know the market, right? They know that it's only going to be coming down to 3, maybe, right? 4 teams, maybe. And I only say 3 teams because that's what I've been thinking all along. So like, I don't understand that first and foremost. And like, we have heard reports saying that, at least the Mets and the Red Sox have $600+ million deals out for Juan Soto. The Yankees might, I don't know for sure. Nobody knows for sure, but they might not be willing to go up to $600 million for Juan Soto. Again, I honestly don't think not hearing any solidified dollar value is any significance in the pursuit of Juan Soto, right? I don't think that there's any significance in that at all. And quite frankly, like outside of the whole Blue Jays debacle regarding Shohei Ohtani, where JP Morosi just honestly just jumped the gun and was just incredibly wrong and had to apologize about his report of Ohtani hopping on a plane to go to Toronto and meet with the Blue Jays front office. I don't think we heard any reports solidified in terms of the numbers before we had the $700 million figure. Yeah. So, you know what? I mean, the Juan Soto sweepstakes, they are what they are. We know that there's a range. I'm going to be very blunt with you all, and I'm going to be very clear. I understand that there was a preconceived notion or a precedent that Juan Soto could break the $700 million figure that Shohei Ohtani set. I don't think it's happening. I don't think it's happening at all. And I don't think the offers in their early stages are nearly enough to progress into the later stages of getting up to $701 million, right? I've said all along, right, we can see a deal between 650 to 675. Anything north of that is quite simply unrealistic in the way that I'm thinking for Juan Soto, whether it's $13 or $14 million or 13 or 14 years, excuse me. So again, that's my line of thinking, but I know a lot of other fans are like enamored with, Juan Soto's going to break, Shohei Ohtani's overall contract value. They're going to give him $701 million. That could be true. It could be true, but I don't think it is. I don't think it is because I think that if a team was willing to do that he would have already signed the dotted line already. It would have already been reported. He would have already signed as of December 3rd at, 6:08 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. He would have already done it. But the simple fact of the matter is that he's not getting any contract offer from any team in this league that surpasses $700 million. And you know what? If I'm wrong, I'll eat crow. I'll come on to my channel and say that I was wrong publicly because this is such a huge topic, but I don't think it's true. I don't think that he's getting more than that. Again, 650, 675, perhaps even 680 is fine for Juan Soto. That's fine. It's realistic. He's not getting 700 plus. So again, I do think that the Mets and the Red Sox offers, they're kind of in a way battling it out. They are going back and forth with one another. Perhaps Boras is probably trying to, in the likeliest of scenarios, or the likeliest of my mind scenarios, is that, Boras is trying to swindle the Red Sox in terms of negotiating even more so they get the last pretty penny out of Steve Cohen. But guess what? Steve Cohen is going to be the highest bidder. That's not my worry, Rob. That's not my worry. And Mets fans, that shouldn't be your worry. The only worry that we should have in terms of the Juan Soto sweepstakes is if he actually wants to stay in New York and be a part of the Yankee or the Mets organization. He's not going to be a Yankee. He doesn't want to be a Yankee. I don't think he wants to be a Yankee. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that. A very early limb to say that. I do think, as I've always thought, it's between the Mets and the Red Sox. And Steve Cohen is just simply not going to be outbid, Rob. He's not. So if he goes to the Red Sox, it's more situational. Perhaps it's a relationship that he has with David Ortiz. That's the only way he's going to go to the Red Sox. If it's about money, Mets fans, he'll be in Queens. That's it.
The only way I think it gets to $700 million if Juan Soto has pen to paper with the Boston Red Sox and Steve Cohen comes in last minute on his, on his white yacht and just rolls in and says, "I'll give you $700 million. Done deal."
We need to make a little GIF or like a little video
Yeah.
of Steve Cohen on his little.
We're like bags of money like this at the front of the yacht with his little captain hat. But I think that's the only way it happens. Like, I think because look, Stearns is not running this signing at all, right? David Stearns is not, the lead guy on this Juan Soto thing at all. This is Steve Cohen's baby here. And I don't think Steve Cohen, I think he's got burned before, and I don't think he's going to get burned this time. I think he's going, unless Juan Soto says to him, "I don't want to play for the Mets," but there's been no indication that Juan Soto wants to be anywhere in particular, right? For the Yankees, he knows what the Yankees are. He knows the organization. He knows Yankee Stadium, right? He knows that. I don't think he has any place where he says, "I want to be here." If that's in Queens, if that's the Bronx, if that's Boston, if that's Toronto or somewhere else. I still believe that he's going to the highest bidder. I don't think he cares who he plays for. As long as the team is willing to be contenders and be a really good team and acquire more good players and be contenders, I think that's all he cares about. I don't think it matters if he's wearing orange and blue or wearing pinstripes or wearing, the navy blue and red of the Red Sox or the Toronto or the Blue Jay hat. I don't think it matters. I don't think it really matters to him. I think he wants the biggest offer because he's waited for this day. And that's just my thought process. And if Steve Cohen doesn't have the biggest offer and we find out he doesn't have the biggest offer, now, is it a possibility where Juan Soto, is there any possibility Scott Boras' final phone call won't be to Steve Cohen and saying, "Hey, the Red Sox offered $675 for 15 years. You don't think Steve Cohen's going to say, "All right, we're giving $700 for 15 years," right? I don't see any scenario where Scott Boras' final phone call before Soto signs isn't to Steve Cohen. If Steve Cohen doesn't have the biggest,
did the Yamamoto sweepstakes come down to a final phone call to the New York Mets outside of the Dodgers offer?
Because Yamamoto wasn't agent wasn't Scott Boras.
No, I know that. I'm just saying, like, in general, with that kind of sweepstakes, like they did not pivot back to.
Well, I think Yamamoto. I think the Dodgers got the final phone call because I think Yamamoto wanted to go to the Dodgers, but if the Dodgers didn't match the Mets, he would have been a Met. To be quite honest with you, so I do think that Scott Boras is final. If Steve Cohen doesn't have the biggest offer and another team comes in and one-ups the Mets offer, Boras is calling back up Steve Cohen because I truly believe that Steve Cohen told Boras, "Listen, whatever offer you have on the table before he signs, call me back." I truly believe that. I think Steve Cohen has been waiting for this moment for 2025. He marked it on his calendar the day he took over the Mets ownership of this day of Juan Soto being a free agent.
At least since the Correa deal went through or fell through.
Correct.
At least.
I feel like he does not want to be denied here. Now, if Juan Soto didn't want to be a Met, the Mets wouldn't be a finalist. That's been reported. Any team that was involved, now there might have been other teams that we don't know about that Juan Soto says, "I'm not going there." It could have been the Giants who wants to spend money, but nobody wants to go there, right? It's truly possible that whatever team has final offers on the table, Juan Soto is willing to go there. That's why there's no loyalty here to him, right? There's no loyalty to the Yankees. He played 1 year with them, right? There clearly wasn't any loyalty with the Nationals, who was willing to give him $400+ million. So I think he's going to the biggest offer because that's what he's been waiting for. Regardless if it's any team we're talking about, those teams are going to have a chance to be better because of Juan Soto and probably going to do more to make that team better along with Juan Soto. So whatever team he goes to, it's going to be a contender. It's just that simple. So look, please let it end before the winter meetings because I would love to talk about whoever got Juan Soto. that our team needs to pivot. That team needs to pivot, right? If the Mets don't get Juan Soto, we're going to be talking about plan B because plan B is already in effect. And that's where we got to get into, well, we definitely got to probably sign Alonso now. Maybe we do got to sign Anthony Santander and so many other aspects of not getting Juan Soto. All right, let's get back to the main topics. Other starting pitchers, right? This has been the hot stove of starting pitching for the most part until Soto news popped up, like always, because nothing can be done without Soto news. So starting pitching, you talked about Mike Soroka. He is a guy that, that Achilles, man. I mean, it took him a long time to get back on that mound and be healthy. Can he be healthy? He was damn good prior to that injury. And the unfortunate part, he did it at Citi Field, popping that Achilles, and he did it twice. Is he a reclamation project? Yeah, sure. Is he a guy that you can probably sign for very cheap, maybe a 1-year deal, 1-year prove it deal, and get him? What is your thought process on Soroka? As you were the one that brought it up to me, as we were texting each other back and forth. What are your thoughts on Soroka? Do you think it's a possibility, and would you want him on this Mets rotation?
First of all, Mike Mayer on X was the first one to just state that the Mets were interested in Mike Soroka. So I wanted to give credit where credit was due. And I took a look at Soroka and the year that he had in 2024, and I liked what I saw. Not as a starter, as a reliever.
Okay.
As a reliever. Again, the injury history, he was one of the more polarizing players coming into the league as an Atlanta Brave, as a starter. But forearm, shoulder, Achilles twice. I mean, you name it. The injuries, he's had it, right? Like it's kept him out. And it's taken a toll on him to the point where last year, right? First of all, he was 0-10 last year. That was his win-loss record. I know the win-loss record, it's not really an indicative stat, but he was 0-10. The White Sox were garbage. They were horrible. We know that, right? They weren't doing him any favors. So I throw the win-loss out the window, right? That doesn't matter. But what I see is like a guy that really took off from starting out as a starting pitcher to going to a reliever in terms of the strikeout rate and in terms of just his overall success and in terms of, batting average surrendered, OPS surrendered. I mean, as a starter, he was surrendering over an 850 OPS. And as a reliever, it was down to under 600. So that's a very distinct difference. And the fact of the matter is that the strikeout rate as a reliever went through the roof because he is also a 3-pitch type pitcher, right? But the slider again, Rob, how many times am I going to mention a slider with the likes of David Stearns, which is, again, why there is a little bit of a shock to me why they are targeting Mike Soroka, but there shouldn't be because his slider is one of the best in the league. In terms of the whiff rate and the put away capability. I mean, he doesn't throw as hard as he used to. I do love pitchers that throw 97, 98 miles per hour, etc. But he throws 94, perhaps maybe 95 topping out. The slider, great movement. I mean, he's a 3-pitch mix pitcher and he had a lot of success. I mean, when he got back, because I know that he did suffer a shoulder injury as well. Again, this is another project that you can't automatically slot in, unfortunately, in the back end of your bullpen. If he was healthy and if he had a healthy track record, maybe you could do so. But because Mike Soroka has missed so much time over the past 3 or 4 years, this is another project. But there are going to be other teams bidding for him. Where I see Mike Soroka fitting in, right? A 1-year, 2, 3, maybe even a $4 million deal, depending on how many teams are really in on him, is perhaps a 6th or 7th inning type slot. I would start him out at a lower leverage inning situation, 6th inning for sure. And then depending on what you get in terms of contributions from a guy like Buto or Reed Garrett and anybody else that you sign, maybe a Ryan Stanek, or maybe this is Ryan Stanek's replacement, which I can also see as well. Then you start to phase him into more of game-ready situations in terms of being that 7th, 8th inning type guy, a bridge to Edwin Diaz. So I like Mike Soroka a lot. Again, that there's a lot of unpredictability, but there's a lot of projectability too in terms of what we saw from him as a reliever. Mm-hmm. The one thing that I have a problem with, and this is what I'll say, Mets fans, this is what I'll say. The one thing that I have a problem with the Mets in general in terms of their pitching targets right now, this applies to Buehler. This applies to Frankie Montas, who they officially gave a contract to. And this applies to Mike Soroka as well, is that all of these guys have walk issues. All of these guys have control issues or have had control issues. And that's a very well-known fact. So the Mets are obviously banking on the projectability that I was talking about, but they don't it's not an easy path forward for them because they have a lot of work to do in terms of gaining or getting these pitchers under control and lowering that walk rate. And you know what? It's kind of also, it doesn't inspire much confidence for me because I take a look at a rotation and a bullpen that walked the ballpark last season for the New York Mets. And I'm like, I understand the upside of all these candidates, and I'm not going to just sit here and tell you that I wouldn't sign these guys because of their walk issues, but we have to also be cognizant of the last 2-3 seasons for each of these pitchers, whether it's Montas, who's under contract now officially, or any other candidate, that they have had some walk issues. So that's something to at least pay attention to. And again, I'm not going to compare any of these pitchers to the likes of Shintaro Fujinami, but you take a look at how excited a lot of people were in this fan base for Shintaro Fujinami last offseason in terms of signing him for a little 1-year year deal, etc. And he could not get his walk issue, his control issue ironed out in the minor leagues. Again, it's glass half full, half empty. So I just want to let everyone know that, yes, that there's a lot of great things to be had from all of these pitchers that we are mentioning, but we also have to talk about that walks have also plagued the majority of these pitchers that we're also talking about.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be against Soroka throwing him in the bullpen and seeing what you got out of him, because I think it's all a crapshoot when you talk about the bullpen for the most part, unless you're going to go at the high end relievers, which I don't think the Mets are going to go much at all at the high end reliever market. I mean, maybe one guy that you might get a 2-year deal on, but I think it's mostly going to be a bunch of arms that have good stuff, but are guys that probably had mediocre seasons and it's going to throw together. Maybe Soroka is one of those additions to the bullpen that is a possibility. But yeah, it's going to be interesting how they're going to go about it. I don't think the bullpen arms, the big bullpen arms, you might see 1 or 2 might sign at the winter meetings, but I don't think the Mets are anywhere in that realm of possibilities when it comes to the bullpen. That's why you're hearing about Soroka. That's why you're hearing about Clay Holmes possibly as a starter, most likely in a bullpen slot. There's so many other ways that the Mets can go, and that so much stuff is up in the air, and that's the I guess the annoying part about this offseason so far, and this hot stove, cold stove, as we're really talking about, really what's going on here, because we really don't know. It's been very quiet, right? The Montas signing came out of nowhere at 10 o'clock at night, 10:30 at night. So, the Mets don't leak out anything. And, that's why when you're hearing rumors about the Red Sox and the Yankees' second offer and the Blue Jays might come with the highest bid when it comes to Soto, and you hear the Mets, nothing, I always think that's a good sign on any spectrum, from starting pitching to Soto to relievers to wherever. So when it's quiet in the Mets aspect of a player, I think that's always a good sign. So, and I think when it comes to Buehler, I think that's more realistic, and you might hear that. But would I be against Soroka? No, Not at all. And I think it's hard to, question anybody. Like, I don't think anybody for the bullpen, anybody should be outraged if there's a sign in like a Soroka or of that caliber, mediocre type pitcher that, who knows what you're going to get from. Because I think bullpens, year by year basis. And, who the hell knows anymore? I hope the winter meetings is active in regards to everything when it comes to hopefully Soto's done and maybe the bigger name free agents go. Because I truly believe this, Chris, and maybe I might be wrong. I think Major League Baseball, especially the way the last two winter meetings have gone, they need a very active winter meetings because there's going to be a lot of talk where when that new CBA comes up, that there's going to be a grace period from December 1st until, maybe they'll extend the winter meetings or have like a grace period of from December 1st to December right before Christmas, where all the free agents need to sign, or, rate the top 20 guys and they need to come off the board or something like that, because you can't have an offseason where, nobody signs until freaking January and expect people to be excited about baseball because you're already worn out by the times the signings happen, Chris.
Yeah, I've long been said that the MLB free agency process is just way too much. You take a look at the NFL free agency, you take a look at the NBA free agency, and it's like almost day of when that opens up where you see a lot of big signings. So I know that there's a lot of hurdles for MLB to go through, especially with these top guys signing. And we've seen a lot of situations where guys like now Teoscar Hernandez or Anthony Santander are going to wait, for Juan Soto to sign before they sign because they would become the premier guys on the market to try to capitalize on more money. For one reason or another, the NBA doesn't care about that, and the NBA players don't care about that. And that's a situation where Manfred or the commissioner, whoever that may be in the next couple of years, like they have to figure that out because it's not exciting. It's not like, trust me, Mets fans or any MLB fans in general watching this stream, we would rather, and I will probably speak for you, Rob, in this scenario because I think you agree here, is that we would rather be sitting up here talking about concrete information and a boom, boom, boom type of signing period for the Mets rather than, oh, well, the Mets could sign Juan Soto, but they could sign also Anthony Santander. Like, we would rather be talking about this team as a fact-based information, right? Like we don't have the facts to base off of it. And if anybody tells you that they do, they're liars. They're liars. They're not being truthful with you, right? And of course, we put out Juan Soto updates. We put out Juan Soto news. But like sometimes I see Juan Soto news daily, and it's just like you're just repeating the same information.
Exactly.
Like I like to go at least a couple days, 3-4 days, 5 days, maybe even a week without talking about Juan Soto because there's not many updates or information coming out of Juan Soto than what we just heard. So anyways, all this to say that we would rather be talking about factual information. We'd rather be up here talking about concrete reports because again, we're not reporters. We're trying to give you all the latest reports and give you all our opinions about the latest reports surrounding the New York Mets. So it's a brutal process, and we appreciate you all sticking around and being here with us through it all. But that's why I like to do so many, the Mets could sign XYZ player because I really do think that there's a lot of different fits for the New York Mets if, going into free agency and the trade route that they could make this team better by, right? And asked the general names, right? Like I saw someone say David Robertson, right? I've talked about David Robertson in one of my videos probably a couple weeks ago. But again, going past David Robertson, who is kind of an obvious candidate, and we've seen him before, we want to talk about another guy. And I talked about Jimmy Garcia, right? Jimmy Garcia, how many other channels or how many other, Mets fans on X, whatever reports have you been seeing about Jimmy Garcia? Probably not many. And that's kind of the realm and the route that I want to take. So again, it's a hard time for all of us Mets content creators, not only Rob and myself, but all of us trying to talk about Mets baseball, given this kind of lull period that we're trying to figure out this Juan Soto news. But we appreciate you all, and we appreciate the support on the channel very much. So that's kind of what I wanted to say. A little bit of a rant, but I think it's important to know as we reiterate that thought process.
Yeah, and, it's a guessing game at this point, and we try our best to try to pick at certain reports here and there, the very little that there are, and try to put it all together. And we still are probably wrong more often than not, but then we give our opinions. And I'm glad Durang brought up this comment, and thank you for super chat about the DH, because my rapid fire question is involving the DH for you, Chris. Even though it's very pitcher heavy this stream, the DH. Now, I'm not going to ask you a player in particular, but what do you think the Mets are going to do DH wise? Are they going to leave it more of a rotating DH where Marte will DH today, Alonso will DH today, Vientos will DH today, Acuna would DH today, just to get guys bats in the lineup, get them off the field a little bit? What do you think the Mets are going to go DH? Are you think they're just going to go sign a guy who is basically like a Jock Peterson type DH guy? I'm not saying name a guy, but like have a guy that's uniquely a DH specifically, and that's your DH for the season, or you think they're going to keep it open as a rotational spot in the lineup?
As we talked about pitching in this stream, and we talked about the teams needing a lot more offense and the Dodgers of 2024 and their offense carrying them, right? I've been very adamant in the past couple of weeks in my sentiment that the Mets, if they get Juan Soto in the door, you go and re-sign Pete Alonso thereafter. I have been an advocate of that, and I think the money-wise, it's possible. That opens a revolving door between Juan Soto and Starling Marte as your DH and also as your right fielder. A rotating door between those two guys. You could even throw in Pete Alonso as a DH with Juan Soto in right field and somebody else manning your third base. I don't know who it is. But again, until it doesn't happen, I'm going to scream at the hilltops of saying the Mets are the best off situationally and offensive-wise if they have Juan Soto and Pete Alonso or any other first baseman. Again, like Christian Walker's out there. Would I be scoffing at Christian Walker? No, I would be fine with Christian Walker as well. I'm going to say Pete Alonso for the sake of the conversation. I know that Christian Walker has his advantages contractually, right? I understand that. And I know that some Mets fans would rather have Christian Walker as their first baseman because he gives you more plus defense than Pete Alonso does with similar, right, power numbers than Pete Alonso, but not all the way similar because Pete Alonso's power numbers are not very easily replicated is what I'll say. But that's the route that I'm taking, Rob. If Steve Cohen is opening up his checkbook to the ultimate degree, if this is what's happening this offseason, and if you want to be on the Dodgers level, you go sign Juan Soto, and then you go ahead and you get your first baseman, whether it's re-signing Pete Alonso or whether it's signing Christian Walker. You allow Juan Soto to be your DH and rotate in him, or rotate there with him, I should say, Starling Marte.
Yeah.
That's what you do. And again, I know a lot of people want to say Juan Soto is going to be your right fielder and Starling Marte is going to be the DH. If that's what it takes, then so be it.
Right.
At that point, I don't care who's in right field. I honestly think, even though Starling Marte is 34, going on 35 years old, and has had subpar defensive, I guess, capabilities in right field over the past couple of years, I kind of still would rather him manning right field defensively than Juan Soto. But again, if it's these two guys, I do not care if you have a rotation at DH. Go get Juan Soto, go get Pete Alonso, Christian Walker, whoever, and let's roll because we need a powerhouse top 5, top 6 in the lineup. Hopefully, with the reemergence of Francisco Alvarez, and hopefully with another 25 plus home run campaign from Jose Siri, and then we're cooking. That is really the again, I can talk about plan Bs, plan Cs, plan Ds. That's my plan A. If you're the New York Mets and you want to compete for a championship with the Dodgers, that's what you got to do. Nothing more, nothing less. I rest my case.
100%. I do like that rotational DH. I think that leaves you a lot of opportunities to bring more guys involved in your lineup, more guys in your roster. That gives more opportunity for Mauricio when he comes back, or Acuna, or if Juan Soto some days you want to keep Juan Soto out of right field because he's not great defensively, you DH him and you put Marte out there, or you put somebody else out there. I think there's so many ways to go, and the flexibility that you seen last year that Mendoza had, where Tyrone Taylor played everywhere, Nimmo played center occasionally and played left. Marte, didn't play one day, or came out after the 6th inning and he put Tyrone Taylor in right field. The flexibility you give Mendoza only makes him a better manager, because it gives him more options to put quality players in a situation to be successful. And I think that's important as well. You got to lead. You're probably taking Juan Soto out in right field for a better defensive player. Like, that's how it's going to work. So I think the DH is going to have a lot to do with the rotational aspect of this entire roster. And most likely it's probably going to be more with the Alonso, Soto, Marte with that DH flexibility as well. So I think it's great. And yet the plan A is always, it never changed. It's Soto, Alonso, and a top line starter. I think that's a plan A for everybody. If you want to leave the starter to the side, Alonso, Soto is your plan A. I think that would be everybody's plan A. Is it Stearns' plan A? I'd hope so. I mean, I haven't spoke to him. I try to call him, but he don't pick up. But I mean, we really don't know. Chris, you got a rapid fire for me?
Yeah, I got a rapid fire for you. I'm trying to figure out how to word this, though. So I guess in the aspect of the rotation,
okay,
would you be okay? First of all, it's a two-part question. One is, do you think, genuinely, in your most unbiased state of mind, do you think the Mets are really going to get a co-ace alongside Senga, whether it's free agency or whether it's trade? And then my second question to you, as we were talking about earlier on this stream about just getting pitching assets in the door and maybe not getting a top line starter alongside Kodai Senga, would you be okay with rolling with a rotation of Senga, Manaya as your co-aces, and then a rotation of, like, let's say Buehler, Peterson, Montas, and then whoever else is your SP6? So two-part question. Do you think we're getting an ace? And if you don't think we're getting an ace, are you content with Manaya being your co-ace and then the rest of the guys being, let's face it, maybe outside of Peterson, reclamation projects going into 2025?
I do think the Mets are going to get an ace. We can debate 3 hours of if it's going to be trades or free agency. I think they're going to get an ace or a top line starter. If you want to call that person an ace or not, whatever. But I think they are. But to play devil's advocate and play the other side of this, if the Mets are going to go with, Senga as their ace and work around guys like Manaya, Buehler, and throw them into the rotation with Peterson and Montas, I'm not gonna be comfortable with that. I kind of brought that up a little earlier, but to really reiterate and prove the point of why I don't like that, I go back to what they said. They are going for it in 2025. They want 2025 was their contending year. That was when they really made that big push for where their ultimate goal is, and that's a World Series. You can't tell me that that's going for it and tell me that you're going confidently with Kodai Senga as your ace and other guys that you're counting on Minaya being a co-ace at that point and being what he was last year, which could be possible, but is that a guarantee? No. Walker Buehler is still a reclamation project. David Peterson, just because he was good last year and he was healthy, do we know he's going to be okay going into that? I think he will be, but he's still a question mark until he does it again. And then Montas is clearly a reclamation project. So you're going with Kodai Senga, who was hurt last year, being as good as he was 2 years ago and remaining healthy. Minaya, you're hoping to be a co-ace or a number 2 to be as good, if not almost as good as last year. And then you go with Walker Buehler, who doesn't have the same stuff he did 3 years ago, 4 years ago, prior to his Tommy John, which is reclamation project and hoping for the best. And then Peterson hoping for another year like he had this year. And then your reclamation project in Montas. You know what that means? That's a lot of question marks and ifs. You can't tell me you're going for it and throw that rotation out and tell me that that's a good way of bringing your team to that next level, to get to that Dodger level or beating the Dodgers. I find that hard to believe. So I would not be happy with that. And I don't think that's a good way to go about it. So to put that whole answer into perspective, I think they're going to get an ace.
Boom. There you go. I also think they're going to get an ace as well. We'll see, though. Again, that's just me going out on a limb and not having anything concrete behind that. But again, we'll see. There's again, as many hot stove lives as we've done already, there's still a lot of Mets offseason content to talk about. And there's still a lot of speculation to be had in terms of the route that this team is going down this offseason. So I think we've been doing a good job in terms of covering it all, though. Honestly, I think I like the pitching focus, because I think that was the most, and chat, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that was the most concern that I saw from Mets fans outside of the Juan Soto sweepstakes is what were the Mets going to do on the pitching front. And I think that in this stream alone, we covered pretty much most of it. So hopefully you all are content with that until maybe the next report gets released.
Yeah, I mean, the rotation is, besides the bullpen, the rotation was the biggest, question mark because so many guys became free agents. The Mets basically didn't have a rotation. They could start the season tomorrow. They wouldn't even have a full rotation. So I'm really glad that episode 10 of Mets Hot Stove focused clearly on starting pitching throughout. Yeah, we trickled in Soto because a report came out. But, pitching is a big aspect this offseason because of the rotation and because of the big names that are available through trades and free agency. So, guys, that was episode 10 of Mets Hot Stove in the books now. We got 5 days until the winter meetings. If you haven't heard, Andy Martino on SNY said that he's hearing a lot of rumbling that Juan Soto is going to make his decision prior to the winter meetings, and the final offers from teams are going to be this week. So hopefully we get some clarification on who gave these final offers and possibly what they are, but hopefully we have a clarification of where Juan Soto is going to go, and we can put that to bed and focus on the other needs of our team, and we can get into the real business of the offseason after Juan Soto, because there's a lot of work to do after Juan Soto, even if he does become a New York Met. So, Chris, final words and let everybody know what's going on with your channel, buddy.
No, I appreciate it. There's a lot of work left to be had. Again, Frankie Montas, that's just the tip of the iceberg, Mets fans. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Get ready for more reports. Get ready for more videos from both of our channels, more streams, etc. We're talking about it all. I dropped a video today talking about Clay Holmes, and again, I added on to what I said in that video on this stream. But if you missed that video, please do go ahead down in my description, right in my live stream, and check it out, or just go to my channel and check it out. Again, subscribe, like, all that fun stuff. I appreciate it. Congrats to Rob on 6A+ subscribers. That's a great feat. We appreciate you all. That's the bottom line. I think that regardless of, whatever final thoughts I want is that, okay, I hope we get Juan Soto. I hope we get, Corbin Burns. I hope we get everybody that it's going to help this Mets team win a championship. But, bar none, I really do appreciate all the Mets fans that are, in the same boat as us as fans, Rob, right? Because at the end of the day, like, we're just fans here talking about this team. We appreciate every one of you all coming in these live chats, going in the comments section, and just giving your thoughts and opinions on this team as well. We really do appreciate it. So we read each and every one of your comments here in the live chat, whether we can get to it or not. Again, we have a hard time keeping the flow of conversation if we are addressing every single comment, but don't worry. As we are going through this, we are reading every single comment. So we appreciate it. Thank you for the support. It does mean a lot. It means a lot to me. And we hope that you all keep sticking by us here in this offseason and going into the season. Because again, Amazing Mets pregame shows, they're going to be right around the corner. Post-game shows are going to be right around the corner. Perhaps in-game live streams are going to be around the corner. Listen, it's going to be an exciting 2025 season. And we are happy that you all are here. So thank you. And let's go Mets. We'll see you all probably again on the live stream. Probably one more time by the end of this week, right, Rob?
I would think so. I think we would do one more before the winter meetings start, so we can do our special winter meeting shows. They're probably ain't gonna be Mets hot stoves during the winter meetings. It'll be like winter meeting specials that are basically hot stove, but we're combining it all together. My final thoughts, guys, with the whole situation, right? Winning the offseason doesn't necessarily win you the season or win you the playoffs or win you a championship. But man, how great would it be if the Mets win, quote unquote, the offseason with a massive offseason of signings and trades and really bolster this team? It would pump up Met fans. And again, that doesn't mean you're going to win anything. But going into the season with a lot of expectation, with a lot of great signings and trades and bolstering this team will make you feel a lot better than what we were going into 2024 when we really had no idea what it was going to be. It turned out to be a lot of fun, but it was a surprise for a lot, for all of us. Game 6 of the NLCS, but there isn't a surprise anymore. We need to get further. It's just that simple. So, guys, thank you for watching episode 10 of Mets Hot Stove Live. If you missed anything, you got an hour and 46 minutes of Hot Stove to check out if you haven't seen anything. Subscribe to the channels, guys. Make sure you hit that like button. Always have that notification on for the channels, guys, because if there's breaking news, one of us, if not both of us, will be live if the Mets make a signing, regardless if it's big or small. So keep that notifications on. Hit that bell, guys, underneath the screen, underneath the stream right now, so you can get instant notifications when we go live or post a video. With that said, guys, everybody have a great rest of your Tuesday. Let's go Mets, and we'll see you next time, guys, on Mets Hot Stove Live, guys. Have a great night, and we'll see you next time.
Go Mets.
In the dead of night, full of echo. Concrete jungle, dreams bust to grow. Mets in the air, chase glory, no fear.